Welcome to the Lazy CEO Podcast, where Jim Schlexer, author of Great CEOs Are Lazy and founder of the CEO Project, features compelling experts and topics for CEOs of mid to large-size companies. Now, let's get started with the show.
Welcome, everybody, to another Lazy CEO podcast. My name is Jim Schlexer. I am your host today and the CEO of the CEO podcast. Well, we've got another phenomenal guest today, a good friend of mine, Ian Altman, but I'm going to introduce Ian. You may want to sit back. This is going to take a little while. So Ian started, sold, and grew his prior companies from zero to over $1 billion in value. He has since spent years researching how clients make decisions. His modern approach has been instrumental in many companies turning marginal growth into explosive growth and help them thrive when their competitors struggle to merely survive. Very relevant as we go to this next period. He's a co-author and the best-selling Same Side Selling, now in its second edition. And you can read hundreds of his articles if you have trouble sleeping on Forbes and Inc. As a business growth expert and best-selling author, Ian is recognized as one of the top 30 global gurus on sales, and his Same Side Selling Academy is ranked in the top 5 globally for sales development programs. He is a proud graduate of UC San Diego. Now, for those of you that don't know UC San Diego, it is in La Jolla, California, and has a view of the Pacific Ocean. Notably, their mascot is King Triton, which tells you where they spend most of their time. It's not on campus. Ian is proud of the fact that he graduated without ever entering the library at UC San Diego, but he does know where it is because it's on the way to Black's Beach. He writes, he speaks, he coaches, and once in a while, he even belts out a show tune. Welcome, Ian.
No show tunes today, Jim.
Thank God.
that will definitely kill the audience here.
Come on, little Oklahoma never hurt anybody.
Well, I don't know if that's true. Rarely has it hurt people, but in this case, it actually could. And it's just a shame that we don't have wine during this session, because that's a travesty.
That's true, and wine is a shared language of Ian and mine, and we enjoy chatting about it and drinking it together. So, but today, I'll do the riff, and that's a high margin product, wine. Speaking of high margin products,
Nice.
there are, everybody's running a business, and when I talk about the secrets of a great business, great margin is one of them. High gross margin, right? You run a 10% gross margin business, your life is horrible. You run a 70% gross margin business, your business is much better. And you've identified a couple of areas that are what you call margin vampires. And I think that's such a compelling concept. Maybe you could just start us off with, what do you see as the biggest one first? What's the biggest margin vampire that we should be thinking about as CEOs and leaders?
So the biggest margin vampire is that oftentimes as organizations, we believe that the reason why our client hasn't made a decision is because of price.
Yeah.
And our sellers often lead with price and they don't even realize it. So they'll ask somebody in a competitive environment, oh, well, you're working with so-and-so. Well, what are you paying now? Maybe I can save you money. And we've now just made it so the client has now been taught that the most important part of the conversation is price when it isn't. So it ends up being, we're a victim of our own undoing. It's like, we cause the problem by how we package what we do, as opposed to, if we think about it as a CEO, when's the last time you made a really important decision based on price? Hopefully never.
Yeah, well, there was that heart surgery I had, and I shopped that one pretty hard until I found the cheapest guy, right?
Exactly. I went with the low bidder, and you know what? It didn't work out, but
it was cheap. What do you want? I think along those lines, though, it's almost a selection process when you lead with price. People that care about price meaning clients, will be responsive to that lead. Clients that care about what you do, like they really value and get intense, returns on what you do, they're like, price is important, but there's other stuff, right? And so I'm thinking almost by leading with the way you said, I can save you some money, the only people that go, sounds great, are the cheapies, right?
Exactly. And if you sell to them because you were 5% less than somebody else, guess what? 6 months from now, they're going to switch away from you. Why? Because somebody else gave up 5% of margin. And now pretty soon you're at a race to the bottom. And as Seth Godin says, unfortunately, you might win. Right. So,
I've never heard that line. That's a great line.
So it's a race to the bottom that you might win, I believe is the way Seth says it. So it's one of these things where instead, what we want to do is say, gee, when people are looking for this type of solution, they're usually looking for a partner who operates at one of three levels. See, our industry is kind of shaped like a pyramid. And then you describe the base level, what we call the effective level. The next level up is enhanced. And the pinnacle is the engaged level. And if you describe those, what you're describing is, well, gee, at the base effective level is, look, I just want someone who says they can do this. Maybe it's been in other industries. Maybe it's a small shop, this and that, but but they can get the job done. And people go, oh, that sounds okay. And now that's kind of the low bidder. And then it's next level up. Well, it's more cookie cutter. They have 3 different models. As long as you fit into one of those models, wow, you can be successful. At the highest level, this is where you're dealing with an organization that's tailoring what they deliver to what you need. They measure the results and outcomes, make sure that you're moving market share. So which level are you looking for? And now the client goes, oh, well, I want that top level. Now what I've just done is if my marketing, if my sales, if all my messaging is aligned around presenting those 3 levels, then I'm going to attract the people who want that engaged level. Right. And those people generally don't care that much about price. I mean, you can't be 300 times what other people are, but my clients routinely are 20% higher than their competitors, and no one cares. There's a construction company out in Northern California that they were between $100 and $120 million for 3 years in a row. And they said, well, we're just kind of stuck. We can't break through that level. And we introduced this approach. I call it the client vision pyramid of this effective, enhanced, engaged. Took that approach, they rolled it out to their leadership team. 5 years later, 600 million. This year, they're on track to do 700 million.
Nice.
And and they're routinely 20% higher on general conditions than anyone in their industry. And if you talk to people in construction, they're like, well, we can never charge more for general conditions.
Right.
Right. Meanwhile, now I get calls from construction companies in that same region who are like, well, we used to compete really well in these couple of niches, and now this other company is eating our lunch. Can you help? It's like, well, no,
I'm kind of conflicted out. Sorry. You know what's funny though? I have those conversations, and the cost sensitive buyer hides because they know they're not supposed to say it's all about cost. So they go, yeah, sure, we want all that, but clearly cost price is going to be an important element of our decision. Which means price is the only element of our decision, right?
And what we have to teach ourselves is that it's okay as a business for us to walk away from those opportunities.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing, is that as a business, we have to say we're okay walking away. The other side is that oftentimes...
And I want to interrupt you there for a second. Yes, it's maybe not so easy for us to say that as a business. But you know who it's really hard to say that is a salesperson who is on commission, who thinks everything that doesn't move faster than they do is a sale, right?
Yeah.
So how do you get them to believe this? Because they're like, you've seen these funnels packed full of imagination and unicorns,
exactly.
Right? So how do you get the salespeople to buy that idea?
Well, so part of it is by example. So oftentimes we'll get people who are resistant to this.
Yeah.
And in many cases, it's someone who's a high performer, and they say, "Well, gee, I'm the number 1 or number 2 salesperson." Mind you, that's on gross revenue, not on net, because they tend to discount a lot.
Yep.
And not always, but I'm saying in this case, so it's people who discount. And they say, no, I'm not going to take that approach. I'm not going to use this client vision pyramid. I'm not going to focus on results. I'm okay discounting it. And then what happens is the people who embrace this approach start outperforming those people. And that's when those other people come around. They're like, I was the top guy, but I'm not anymore. And now Sally is outperforming. What's that client vision pyramid thing again? Right. So part of it is seeing that. Also, part of it is how we structure comp plans, because sometimes the way we structure comp plans makes it so that for the rep, the easiest thing for them to do is to discount it.
Yeah. I just literally had that conversation yesterday with a client about if they have price control, you can't pay them on revenue.
Yeah.
If they don't have price control, right, then you can. And because because it's the real estate problem.
Yeah.
They go, look, Ian, you and I are fully aligned. I want to sell your house for the maximum possible amount. I'm going to make 6% on whatever you make. So I want the highest number. And the reality is, if I can convince you to dump your price by 50, 60, $100,000 and get a quick sale, I'm going to do that instead of staying there and fighting another month or two to get a better price.
Exactly. In fact, it's funny because in commercial real estate, I've worked with a few of these commercial real estate companies, and they always get beat up by the client who wants to pay a lower commission, by the property owner. And so the angle that we take with them is, look, if I'm gonna give you a concession right now, I'm probably also gonna cave on the pricing when I'm leasing your property. So when I'm selling your property. And here's the math that a lot of people don't think about. So let's say I pay, just for simple math, I'm paying people 5%. And their typical sale is $1 million. So guess what? You sell something for $1 million, you made 50 grand. And now the sales rep who has price control says, you know what? I'm going to discount this deal, and I'm going to discount this deal by 10%. So now it's a $900,000 deal, which means they make $45,000. So they made $5,000 less. The problem is, at that $1 million, let's say you're running a business where you're at 40% margin, and so you were making $400,000, but guess what? You're still delivering the same thing. Now you're making $300,000, and your rep, instead of getting $50,000 off of the $400,000, they're getting $45,000 off the $300,000. Well, your margin almost got cut in half.
Yeah.
Your net margin out of the deal, and it was a 10% hit. So the thing that I suggest people to incorporate is something that says, look, if you discount, then you also get lower revenue recognition. So on the $1 million, you get 100 cents on the dollar revenue recognition. If you drop by 10%, you also get 10% less revenue recognition. So now you get 90% on the 900,000. So now you're actually getting compensated on 81 and 810,000. So it's whatever the ratios are. The challenge with, okay, I'm going to compensate you on net revenue or on adjusted gross, is that sometimes the rep feels like they don't have any control over that. Like, oh, well, so I'm being compensated on adjusted gross, but because people operated inefficiently, I took a hit.
Yeah.
And it becomes too complicated in terms of the math. But you can do that calculation internally as a CEO and package the program so that with your chief revenue officer, you come up with a model that the rep can understand. I always say a good comp plan is one where the rep knows exactly how much they made on the deal before they leave the room.
Yeah, absolutely. And remember, they're not that bright. So it's got to be really simple. I've seen people, I love gross margin based compensation models for all the reasons you talked about. There's two reasons why people tell me they don't like it. One, you indicated, the rep goes, hey, I'm not in control of the gross margin. You can't pay me on that. I got an answer for that. And the second is, you don't want to disclose your profitability to your reps because they go, how does it work? Look, I sold this deal and you made $1 gajillion and I made a little teeny amount. That's not fair. So you do get that, and that valid,
sure,
semi-valid reason. The way you get around this operational risk, right? The execution risk for the rep, you just do it on standard margin. The product has a 35% standard margin. That's the cap. What we execute, whether we achieve 40 or we achieve 32, not your problem, not your business.
Yep.
You work against a 35, that's a standard margin. And so that's one way to get around the execution risk conversation.
Well, yeah, I also think if you take that, it depends on the organization, but if you take that analysis internally and say, okay, if they discount this much, what's the hit to us? And basically, if you're saying to yourself, I want to pay this percentage on what the adjusted gross is.
Yep.
Great. Then figure out what that calculation is internally, and then simplify it for the rep and say, hey, by the way,
translate it up to revenue.
Exactly. Yeah. So you say, okay, because it's much easier for them to get compensated on gross revenue because they know what that is. Right. And to your point, once you say it's on adjusted gross, well, wait, didn't our costs go down in this area? Shouldn't I make more on this? And like you said, wait, we just made $500,000 and I only got paid $40,000. Yeah, it's kind of how it works. We're taking all the risk, but if you can simplify it, I just think it works better.
All right, fair enough. So leading with price or sort of being a discounter is one margin vampire.
Yep.
And your solution there is to try to become customer intimate, craft a solution that solves a problem in a way nobody else can solve it, and not just deliver product, but deliver result, right? Go all the way to result. I think you've talked before about that.
Yeah. And in fact, Jim, the key is this, is that, I mean, that sounds like a lot of work, but instead, if you kind of step back and you just say, we just need to have conversations about what does success look like and what are we going to measure? Because if your team is talking to the end customer and saying, look, if you don't get the results you need, it's probably not a good deal no matter what you pay, right? Yeah.
Right.
Okay. So what are we going to measure together to know that we're successful? And the client says, oh, well, here's what we would measure. Okay. So even if we do everything we said we would do, what might prevent you from getting those results? The client usually sit back and go, well, if our people didn't have the right training, if they didn't have this, they didn't have, okay. So they'll usually identify their own deficiencies,
Right.
which is an opportunity now for your company to say, oh, so should we add that training and this level of support and this level of engineering to ensure your success? Should we add that into our agreement? Oh yeah, please. Because now you're talking about results. So it's not that you need a custom tailored, one-off solution for everybody. It's just every other vendor is asking, what's it going to take for me to get you into this product today? And you're saying, well, look, maybe the product isn't right. What do you need in terms of an outcome to know this was the right thing to begin with?
Right.
And that's where it changes. It's more at the conversation level than I got to engineer some one-off thing.
Yeah, you're making me think about, if you walked through the organization and said, when is a sale done? And, the salesperson might say, when I get a PO, or maybe when my commission check clears, right? The ops person would say, when the product is delivered. The finance person would say, when the check clears, right?
Yep.
And the customer would say, when the result is delivered.
Exactly.
And then that's the whole rotation. So, and I don't think it's just the salespeople. It's operationally, you need to be thinking, we're here to deliver a result, not a product or not a service. It's a result. It's almost a change in the whole view of the company, by the way.
Exactly. Because when I ask people, when I say, so what's the finish line?
Yeah.
I get the exact answers you're talking about. Well, it's the sale, it's the contract, it's getting paid. But when you're the customer, what do you care about? Well, it's just the results. And then people say, well, no, I think it's delivery on our end. I'm like, it's not delivery, because if you deliver everything you said you would deliver and the client doesn't get the results they're looking for, they wouldn't blame you, would they? Of course they will. Absolutely they will. So we need to be focused on results. And when we do that, that's when we get that pivot where people say, yeah, the price doesn't matter. Because I'll ask groups of CEOs, I'll say, okay, if you had two vendors, one's asking you about the results and the other one's asking about who needs to sign off on this, which vendor would you rather deal with? Well, I want the one who's talking about results. Okay, would you pay more for that one? Well, yeah, how much more? Well, I don't know, it depends, is usually the conversation. I go, okay, how much less would you have to pay for it to be a good deal, but you don't get the results that you need? And everyone's like, and the funny part is you'll get people like, probably like 20%. Okay, so if you paid 20% less and didn't get the results, that would be a good deal. No, the answer is, it doesn't matter what you pay. It wasn't a good deal if you don't get the results that you need.
Right.
If we now flip that around and say, okay, so now how do we have that same conversation with our clients? How do we make sure our messaging from a marketing standpoint basically says, look, if you don't get results, we're not happy. If you empowered your team, let's say your salespeople, your sales managers, your chief revenue officer, to say to the client, look, if we don't know what success looks like, we might not deliver it. And our CEO won't permit us to sell stuff if we can't measure the results. What does that tell your client? Oh, well, our results are more important than their sale. And what's the net effect? You'll get more sales because they see a value in getting better results.
Love it. I love the focus on non-cost clients. I love the focus on results to try to get off a price conversation, prevent the discounting. One of the things that used to make me crazy was when my sales force would give stuff away. Like they got the order and then they go, hey, by the way, boss, I threw in training because, they needed it. And, I hadn't put it in the original quote. And I'm like, about then my head would explode. But like, it felt like, I think it's one of your margin vampires, like giving stuff away. So help me with that one, because I get why they're trying to do it. They're maintaining relationship. They want the next sale. They want to look like a big person, but gosh, it's a killer.
It is. And what happens is that it gets back to the same margin discussion where, okay, I'm giving this stuff away, but I already got the sale, I already got my commission. So it doesn't cost me anything to give away $50,000 of additional services. So yeah, let me give it. And then the client's going to be my friend again.
Yeah.
Well, so there's a couple things. One, if we focus better on results up front, then those surprises tend to not come up after the fact. The second side is that from a leadership standpoint, to say, hey, by the way, guys, we were looking, here are things we've been giving away. Why do you think that happens and how do we prevent that? So now the team is part of solving that rather than you just saying, hey, don't do this. You're saying, okay, that's not good. And of course, we want you to get paid on these additional services. So how do we ensure that? And now it's just a matter of, part of it is training your team how to deal with that when the client says, oh, I also need this. And they go, okay. It's a simple answer in some cases of, okay, I mean, you're not expecting us to do that for free, right? And more often than not, the client will say,
well, you've always done it. You've always done it for free. Why wouldn't you do it for free this time?
Well, and keep in mind, they're going to get one of two answers. They're either going to get that answer, or they're going to get the answer that says, well, no, of course not. Okay, well, I'll get you a proposal for that. If they say, well, we've always done it in the past, say, you know, what we found is that when we're giving away for free, we weren't able to bring on the quality people, the right level. And so now we've invested in this. It's not something we can give away in the future. Should we not continue this? And now the client's like, oh, well, now I've got this moment of truth. And guess what? If you focus on results, then it's like, okay, by not doing this, you're jeopardizing results. Everybody wants the free dessert. Everybody wants the extra stuff. But guess what? When you go to the best places, you know you're paying for those things. And it's the places that are begging for business that give stuff away.
Yeah.
And so it's a skill issue that is a matter of, and I will tell you, just this simple notion that I'll come back to of focusing on results is the biggest game changer. Because now when the client says, well, I need this, okay, well, why is it that you need that? Well, because without this, it jeopardizes these results. Oh, okay, well, now the client is acknowledging what the value is, as opposed to, I want this. It's like, look, we're not dealing with toddlers who say, I want this, I want this, I want that. You just got to hand it to them. These are adults, but if we don't have a strategy for how we deal with those situations when they come up, that's when we get trapped. So the in our digital platform, in our Same-Side Selling Academy, we have this thing called the Objection Clinic, and it's playbooks for, okay, when this happens, how do you respond? When this happens, how do you respond? And it's a matter of instilling in your team, here's how I respond to these situations. When the client asks for this, here's what I do. When this happens, here's what I do, so that you now have a common playbook that everyone follows. The trap that people fall into is they don't know how to deal with it. So when it comes up, they just cave and they're like, oh, there's nothing I can do, boss. And you're like, well, actually, there are three things you could have done. You just didn't know what any of those three were. So you just caved. Like your third choice was, I'm going to cave.
Right. Got it. That's fascinating. You know, I think the other part as a leader is, you know, I've always coached, look at the things that you do for free and ask yourself, should I be charging for these things? So your point is like, oh, well, we know we should have charged and they gave it away. I even go earlier than that. We do all kinds of stuff for our clients and we go, well, it's all part of the relationship. I go, well, yeah, but it's valuable and it should be charged. So that testing service that you offer, that training service that you offer, that extended warranty that you offer, all these are chargeable items if you want to.
You know, Jim, I think that's a great point. One thing that I would encourage people also to be careful of is this. Charge for the things where you add additional value and help drive results.
Right.
And don't charge for things where you don't. And what I mean by that is, like, you look at a law firm and how many law firms are making a profit off of photocopies and FedEx and things like that. It's like
things that make me crazy for 500, absolutely. Alex.
And it makes every CEO nuts. That's like, why are they charging for this stuff? Instead of, look, our cost of doing business is this stuff and this is the way we service our clients. Guess what? Figure out what that cost is. And if it's costing you $3 per hour, charge an extra $3 an hour and don't charge those nuisance things. Because
I always debated, how much did it take them to account for, track, put the information in, create the bill for that $12 FedEx shipment that they did?
Yeah. And
It cost them $32 to charge me $12. This is ridiculous. Right?
yeah, in our former business, we were spending millions of dollars a year on IP work, and one of the huge firms, we were looking, and we're like, every time they would do something, oh, and we made 5 copies of this thing, and we're looking, and it's like, 20 some odd $1,000 a month in copying charges. And I said, guys, we're sending this stuff digitally. You guys are printing out 5 copies. There are 2 people working on this. I don't know why you need 5 copies, and you're pricing it at an area where we're actually paying you guys an additional profit for it. We have a real issue with this. And they kept, well, it's just the way we do stuff. So when we switched firms and now they were losing over $3.5 million a year, they said, well, why are you leaving? I said, well, this thing's been driving us nuts and we're just done. So we switched to another firm that said, yeah, they're not going to charge us for photocopies at all. And they said, oh, well, we can remove that. I said, well, it's a little late now, right? We're already gone. But so that's the trap, is just make sure that, yes, you want to charge for things where you're adding value. And my answer is, if there's other stuff that's an inherent cost that you'd like to recover, build it into the areas where you actually add value. So the client doesn't say, why am I paying this much for copies? Instead, the client says, yeah, I pay a little bit more for legal services, but these guys are really good.
Right. If they charged me $8.50 an hour instead of $800, would have covered all the copies in the world, then I wouldn't care, right?
Exactly. It's just, it becomes a nuisance. And then it's an area for the client to say, I'm pissed at these people because of this, and gives them an excuse to move. Yeah. By the way, the flip side of that is also true, which is, in a competitive environment, instead of saying, what are you paying right now? Say, well, what are 2 or 3 things that you love about your current vendor? Well, I love these. Okay. If you could change 1 or 2 things, what would those be? Well, I hate that they charge me for this. Well, now, even if your original proposal would have included that, bury it somewhere else.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Find the hat. So let me just jump over. I'm going to one more sort of current customer question, and then maybe your last vampire if you have one. So I've got a customer that's in the oil patch. They are we've seen the price decay over time. The competitors sort of get flushed out. It is a pretty heavily commoditized offer. The design is standard. They can't modify the design and try to create innovation. And, on the other side, they brought the procurement people in from GM, Ford, the real, open-minded, rational procurement people that we love and care for. So how do you, it is a true grinded out market. And how do you make this move when the customer views it as completely identical and they've struggled at least to create differentiation and change the price point?
Well, you know what? I mean, here's the unfortunate reality. If you don't know why the client's better off buying from you, they're not going to figure it out either.
Yeah.
And sometimes the areas that you latch onto are really wafer thin, and it's just a subtle differentiation. And part of it comes down to what hasn't been working for you in the past. Well, our current vendor didn't do X, Y, and Z. Now I got something to talk about. But if truly you're in a commodity where you're delivering the exact same thing as everybody else, well, you have to look in the mirror and say, if I was the client, why would I pay more for me versus somebody else?
Right.
And if you don't have an answer, don't expect them to come up with it. And guess what? Sometimes it comes down to, well, our terms are better. We're easier to work with. We're more responsive. I mean, if those things matter. And let's face it, if you're buying ball bearings and they're all the same spec, do you really care? Well, you care if the vendor doesn't deliver them.
Yeah.
But as long as the other vendors delivered them, there's not much you can do. So it's, and I don't want to set a false expectation. It's like, look, if you have something that you truly believe is a differentiator, then lean into that and make sure that your clients validate it. If you don't, then you got to find something, or you better be the most efficient producer of that, because you're going to get beat up on margin.
Or find another business to be in.
Yeah.
What other margin vampires should we be thinking about, Ian? What did we miss here?
So the one that gets me is that people are better equipped to deal with situations that will never come up than they are to deal with pricing pressure. And so the funny thing is, people say, "Oh, I don't think that's true." It's like, okay, so I'll ask people, well, how many people here are more likely to catch fire than you are to face pricing pressure? It's like, nobody. Okay, great. What are the 3 things, Jim, that we're supposed to do when we catch fire?
Stop, drop and roll.
Stop, drop, and roll. So everybody knows that. If I had a room of 1,000 people ask that question, everyone in unison would say stop, drop, and roll. Great. What are the 3 things that every company knows to do when they face pricing pressure? And it's like there's this dead silence, and then invariably someone's like, I don't know, stop, drop, and roll. And it's like, yeah, it's exactly what they do. They stop what they're doing, they drop your margin, and they roll over. Right. So that's what happens. So it's the same stop, drop, and roll.
Got it.
That they fall into. So instead, there's a concept that your teams need to understand, which is stop, swap, and trade. So the idea is when somebody says, oh, I don't know, your price is too high. First, we want to stop and clarify. When you say price, do you mean compared to the results that we're delivering? Because if you've talked about results, now you've got something to go back to, right? Do you mean compared to what you might be getting from other people? Do you mean compared to the significance of this issue you're trying to address? So that's the first part. The swap is the next level, which then becomes a matter of, well, what can we swap? Well, maybe it's a matter of we're going to swap out quality, timing, right? Volume. There's some other lever I have to pull other than just price.
All right.
And then the trade becomes something that, okay, look, if in the end I'm going to give something, I have to get something in return. I can never give a unilateral concession. So unilateral concession is I give you the exact same thing at a lower price, because now I'm teaching my client, you may as well ask for a discount because you never have to give anything up.
Right.
And I'm also teaching them I don't believe in the value of my product, and you may as well keep asking, because you're going to get a lower price without giving away anything. As soon as they see there's some sort of, oh, I got to give this to get that, now we're having an honest conversation. So if you have that framework of stop, swap, and trade, what it means is now someone on the executive team gets involved, they get brought into a deal, and they say, well, where are we with this deal? Well, the client pushed back on price. We went through stop. Here's what they said. And here's the things that we offered in terms of a swap. Okay, and now like we have a common language, and in 10 seconds, you can immediately refine your strategy.
Love it. Maybe a couple last things to end on. I wrote an article called Never Give on Price, Always Give on Value, right? So you go, oh, okay, you need a lower price. Well, I'm happy to accommodate that. So let's make which of these things that you said were really important are we going to cross off the list?
Yeah.
And then they go, well, none of them. I don't understand what the question is then, right?
Yep. And then the next step of that, Jim, is to say, okay, well, the only way we could deliver this at that price is if we didn't also do these 2 things, which would put the results at risk.
Yeah.
And we don't feel comfortable with that. Do you guys? And now it's like, oh, that's a good point. And what it also does, it plants in their head, if your competitor is doing it at that price, they're like, well, maybe those guys are cutting that corner. So it's like
there's a reason. Yeah.
There's a little 4D chess element to this.
Zig Ziglar had a great line. He was selling insurance at the time, and they go, oh, the price is a little too high. And then he would do the reflect and so forth.
Yeah.
And he'd go, but I do have a product that might be right for you. It's the 23 hour a day insurance policy. So it's a little bit cheaper, but you're only covered 23 hours a day. You got to pick which hour you don't have insurance. And they go, well, it'd be just my luck that I'd die in that hour. He goes, well, that's a problem.
But it's the same principle.
Yeah, it's an elegant way of doing it. So last one is I've decided I'm gonna pay for one of your keynotes, 2 of your keynotes actually.
Okay.
Yep. Because I want you to do the stuff. Are you more likely to catch on fire or face price pressure? I'm going to pay for you to go to the Firefighters Association and the stuntman convention, and all the hands are going to go up.
so the funny part is, I spoke years ago at basically volunteered to speak at a Chamber of Commerce event. A friend of mine was the president of Chamber of Commerce, said, will you speak at this thing? It's one of your buddies, the president of Chamber of Commerce. Yeah, sure, I'll come speak at it. And so audience of probably about 1,200 people in the room. I said, so who in here is more likely to catch fire than you are to face pricing pressure? And there's 2 tables in the back who raised their hand. I said, really? And the guy goes, we're firefighters, sir.
Well, Ian, this was phenomenal. Is there anything I didn't ask that I should have asked on Margin Vampires before we call it a day?
You know what? I think those are the biggest things. I think if people can focus on results and get your whole team around that, if you can get this notion of this client vision pyramid, so that people are, your team, your marketing, everyone across the organization is focused on these three different levels. That's where you start to carve out the niche, and now you're focused on results instead of price. And if you get that right and nothing else, you'll see an increase in margins.
Love it. Awesome. And if people want more of you, Ian, where do they go?
It's either ianaltman.com or samesideselling.com, and social media, it's Ian Altman everywhere.
Yeah, you're loud. You're like everywhere. They're like worse than Gary Vaynerchuk. You're everywhere. So
I don't think that's possible. I think Gary holds the title on that. But
he does. Awesome. Well, Ian, this was way fun as predicted. A lot of great knowledge that we shared with people, and hopefully everybody's going to be bumping up their margins as a result of listening to this. So thank you so much.
You bet. Thanks, Jim.
All righty. This podcast is brought to you by the CEO Project. At the CEO Project, we work with CEOs to help them grow their business. And our members represent billions of dollars of revenue and profit. And frankly, amongst all of us, we've probably made every mistake in the book, including some you haven't made yet. So if you want to learn from the experience of a bunch of really seasoned CEOs, we're a great place to hang out. In this podcast, what you're going to hear are some of those ideas, concepts, and things that are just going to help you on your journey. If you want to find out more, reach out to us at theceoproject.com, or you can contact me personally at jim@theceoproject.com. Happy listening.
Thanks for listening to the Lazy CEO podcast. We'll see you next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes, and check out our website, www.theceoproject.com.